The novel, The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, was first published around 1908. It has the distinction of being one of the first million-copy bestsellers in American history. Not only did this propel the book's author, John Fox Jr., into the national spotlight, but the man upon whom one of the novel's characters was based as well. This was Devil John Wright, who is depicted as the giant mountaineer Devil Judd Tolliver in the novel. The book would spawn no less than 3 motion pictures. One of these was an early effort at direction by acclaimed movie director, the iconic Cecil B. DeMille. Another, filmed in 1936, being the first outdoor Technicolor film ever made, would include the film debut of a young actor named Henry Fonda. Unfortunately, this film adaptation, directed by Henry Hathaway, bore little resemblance to Fox's novel. Along with these would be a 1912 Broadway production and no less than 2 hit songs, all based upon the book. The Trail of the Lonesome Pine spans a time frame of approximately 10 years between 1884 and 1894. However, it derives from events central to its theme that occurred up to 1908 when it was originally published. The prime example of this would be the dealings between the coal companies, most notably the Consolidated Coal and Coke Company, and the landowners of the region. From 1900 to 1916, Devil John acted as a liaison negotiator between the local citizenry, who had come to trust and respect him, and the coal companies, which compensated him handsomely in the brokering of land and mineral rights during the coal boom at the turn of the 20th century. In 1904, Devil John himself sold vast amounts of his own holdings in Kentucky and settled permanently at Horse Gap on the outskirts of Pound in Wise County, Virginia. It was this event that is the basis for one of the major themes in John Fox Jr.'s novel. This would be the mountaineer character based on Devil John, named Devil Judd Tolliver, making his fortune off of the coal found in his land. It would be the lure of such fortune that originally led the author of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, John Fox Jr., to settle in Wise County, Virginia around 1885. Such interest would inevitably lead him to local movers and shakers like Devil John Wright, who, at the time, resided just across the state line on Elkhorn Creek in Letcher County, Kentucky. Indeed, Fox's keen knowledge in such dealings is superbly reflected in the protagonist of the novel, Jack Hale. Hale dreamed of a prosperity for himself and the town he helped to create through such dealings of industrialization and modernization in the region. The novel portrays it as a dream that would become, in many ways, tantamount to the serpent being unleashed in the Garden of Eden. The novel presents a historically accurate theme of a boomtown gone bust. This is a theme actually reflected by Fox's hometown of Big Stone Gap, from which Fox derived most of the attributes of the novel's fictional town, known simply as The Gap. While the shared interests of land brokering and bringing civilization to the hills was the impetus for John Fox Jr. and Devil John's relationship, it would bloom into a close, enduring friendship. It would be Devil John's tales and a way of life that is an obvious inspiration for much of the novel's narrative. Likewise, Fox would come to an intimate knowledge of Devil John's contemporaries and family members, whom he used as a basis for the characters populating his famous novel. John Fox Jr. was an author during the American naturalism movement in writing, popularized after the Civil War into the first half of the 20th century. Fox employed the local color genre in his writing, also popular at the time. This method is where authors would employ the use of actual persons, places, and events in a mix as the basis for their fictional characters, landscapes, and themes in their writing. This is precisely what the Trail of the Lonesome Pine represents. The book employs a blending of multiple real people to flesh out a single character, or a mixture of locations to derive a single place, and a set of actual events blended with fancy to drive the story. This has led to some confusion when trying to nail down the exact identities of persons, places, and things Fox relied upon in his writing. Indeed, the silent main character of the novel, the Lonesome Pine's actual existence has been a source of regional dispute for over 100 years. Fortunately, this mystery, along with much of where Fox actually gained his inspiration for most of the book's characters, locations, and themes, can be unraveled by an in-depth knowledge of the personal history and times of Devil John Wright. A good example of this would be the Trail of the Lonesome Pines characters of Squire Billy Beams and his wife, Ole Hun. This couple is presented as the only neighbors of the book's heroine, June Tolliver, who lives with her father, Devil Judd Tolliver, her stepmother, and little brother Bub Tolliver in her father's cabin. Devil Judd's home is described as being located down the mountain topped by the Lonesome Pine and situated in Lonesome Cove by Lonesome Creek. Just downstream, Squire Billy and Ole Hun run a grist mill off of the creek. June calls Squire Billy Uncle Billy. The meaning is clear. He is either the brother of her biological mother, who has no mention in the book, or he is the older brother of her dad, Devil Judd. When Fox first encountered Devil John Wright, he resided in a cabin on Elkhorn Creek with his wife, Mattie, and any number of Devil John's children, including those to whom Mattie would be considered a stepmother. Devil John's closest neighbors on Elkhorn Creek were his brother, kinky-haired Sam Wright, and his wife, Martha. Here the couple ran a grist mill. The most obvious discrepancy between the fictional Uncle Billy and Ole Hun and the real-life kinky-haired Sam and his wife Martha is that the couple in the novel are portrayed as a kindly elderly couple. Kinky-haired Sam and Martha were, in reality, much younger than Devil John. It is more likely than not that Fox blended an actual elderly couple known by him personally, but lost to history, with the people he undoubtedly encountered during his many visits to Devil John's home in Kentucky. It is a classic example of the local color genre being employed in its blending and mixing of characters and story components from real-life counterparts. As stated, it is this blending that has resulted in much speculation and even dissension amongst folks claiming that their respective ancestor or relative just had to be the sole basis for some of the book's characters. Beyond this, matters of civic pride have entered the fray regarding which town is Fox's The Gap based upon. Was there ever a real Lonesome Pine? If so, which mountain did the Lonesome Pine adorn? There is even a question as to which state, Virginia or Kentucky, did any of this really occur. Local figures, writers, and historians have argued these questions for over a century. For instance, The Gap is the town where much of the novel's action plays out. Because of obvious descriptions, including named locations and structures, it has long been supposed that The Gap is actually Fox's hometown of Big Stone Gap, Virginia. Indeed, this identification has resulted in Big Stone Gap putting on a perennial outdoor drama since 1964 of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine during the summer months. It's been adapted as a musical performed by the locals and has been actually designated as the official state outdoor drama for Virginia. However, a detailed look at Fox's Gap reveals details of geography, history, and incidentals that clearly show the Gap is based not just on one, but 4 separate towns in the region. These are unquestionably the towns of Norton, Pound, then called Pound Gap, the county seat of Wise, and finally, Big Stone Gap itself. All of these are located within a 20-mile radius in Wise County, Virginia. Part and parcel with the book's fame are myriad business and civic concerns sporting titles like Trail and Lonesome Pine in their names. A prime example is the hospital, where the movie star Elizabeth Taylor once received emergency treatment. This was after a choking incident famously parodied by John Belushi on Saturday Night Live, which the famous actress suffered in Big Stone Gap while dining with her then husband, Virginia State Senator John Warner. Naturally, the hospital is called Lonesome Pine Hospital. Another example would be the Lonesome Pine Scenic Byway. The local Boy Scouts are part of the Lonesome Pine District. The list goes on and on. The Trail of the Lonesome Pine has taken on a huge role in the society of America that exists within the region of Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, as far north as Beckley, West Virginia, and southward into the Smoky Mountains of eastern Tennessee. The protagonist of the novel is John Jack to his friends Hale. This main character seems to be a composite of no less than 3 individual men, including John Fox Jr. himself. Jack Hale is presented as an engineer who originated from his hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, where he attended Transylvania University. He has settled in the idyllic pre-industrial mountain hamlet called The Gap. He envisions growing rich and modernizing the Gap by brokering deals with the local mountaineers for harvesting the vast coal and iron deposits held within their lands. Unfortunately, by the novel's end, Hale's good intentions and lofty expectations begin to be consumed by the coal boom he himself ignites. The comparison of Hale to his creator, Fox, is easily made in this regard. As previously stated, Fox came to the region 23 years prior to his novel's publication. He was following the exact ambition as his character. John Fox Jr. also attended Transylvania University, but would eventually graduate with a major in English from Harvard. He, like Hale, was a "furriner," as the mountain folk called those not native to their mountains. He, like Hale, fell in love with the region, being enchanted by its people and environs. Unlike Hale, John Fox Jr. did not do that well at brokering land deals, but just as his character, he experienced the romance of his life while living in the hills. Indeed, the Trail of the Lonesome Pine is nothing if not a timeless romance. While his character, Hale, finds love in the person of Devil Judd's free-spirited, pseudo-feral, but highly intelligent and beautiful daughter, June Tolliver, Fox fell in love with the renowned Austrian opera diva Fritzi Schiff. Fox actually dedicated his famous novel to F.S., Fritzi Schiff, and the couple was married just after the book's 1908 publication. Their torrid romance would not, however, have a happy ending. By all reports, Fritzi loathed living in the little mountain town to which Fox took her home. The couple divorced in 1913 after just 5 years of marriage. 6 years later, on July 8, 1919, John Fox Jr. died of complications due to pneumonia. He was interred in his hometown near Paris, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, Ohio. It is generally thought that even though the novel's heroine, June, is not solely based on Fritzi, certainly Fox's descriptions of the romance between Jack and June reflects the degree to which Fox had been smitten by the feisty, Austrian-born cosmopolite. In his lifetime, John Fox Jr. produced 11 notable literary works. His first novel, The Kentuckians, was published in 1897. The following year, he worked as a correspondent in the Spanish-American War. From 1904 to 1905, he worked as a correspondent in the Russo-Japanese War. While his books and stories eclipsed his career as a journalist, it is notable that he originally worked in 1883 as a reporter in New York City. Likewise, the Hale character is portrayed as having connections in and making visits to the northern metropolis. In the end, Fox died a rich man, having sold over 2 million copies of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine alone in the 11 years prior to his death. Beyond the obvious blending of his own life and the Jack Hale character, there is a second source that must be considered. It has long been reported, and remains so on the Trail of the Lonesome Pine Outdoor Drama's official webpage, that a certain geologist and contemporary of Fox's, named James Hodge, brought a young girl out of a local backcountry coal camp and enrolled her into school in Big Stone Gap. Here he remained her sponsor and provided for her education. The uncanny resemblance to elements of Jack Hale and June Tolliver's relationship cannot be overlooked. While there is some question as to the veracity of the story, its blending into Fox's narrative would be in keeping with the local color genre with which he wrote The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. This, and if the story's true, the congruity of the two tales would make the odds of it being sheer coincidence astronomical. The third source of the Hale character seems to be a young man who courted and eventually married one of Devil John's daughters named Willie Church. Willie, like the Uncle Billy character, was known as Squire Billy. He was a man who, in spite of his youth, was installed as an overseer in constructing train trestles, but, like Hale, referred to himself as an engineer. Accordingly, his preference of dress closely resembles Fox's description of Hale's attire. Most tellingly, when Willie Church approached Devil John with his notion of marrying his daughter, effectively removing her from her duties at the house, Devil John's original reply is practically a word-for-word quote of the Devil Judd character's original response to Hale bringing June to the Gap for schooling. It has long been established that the Tolliver clan of the novel is based on Devil John's kinfolk, the Wright family. Even the surname Tolliver and its derivative Taliaferro, also described in the novel, are common Christian names within the Wright family contemporaneous with Devil John. During the friendship between John Fox Jr. and Devil John Wright, that spanned 20 years, Fox paid many visits to both of Devil John's homes. It would be at these locations that Fox would come to be intimately knowledgeable of all of Devil John's family members who were spoken of, lived nearby, or actually lived with Devil John, as was common to the clannish people of the region in that time. These locations included the home on Elkhorn Creek in Kentucky and the home at Horse Gap near Pound, Virginia. It would be these two locations in both states that Fox would blend into the memorable fictional cabin at Lonesome Cove on Lonesome Creek in the shadow of the Lonesome Pine. The small road that used to lead from the small community, then known as Pound Gap, up to Devil John's home at the base of the mountain, creating the eastern flank of Horse Gap, is now a roadway intersected by the modern four-lane highway of US 23. This nondescript little road that Fox would travel as the last leg of his trip when he visited Devil John is in fact the actual trail referred to in the Trail of the Lonesome Pine. If one travels southwest on Main Street in Pound, after crossing Highway 23, the road, State Route T630, becomes Old North Fork Road. This roadway from the town limit to Horse Gap is what remains of the actual trail described in The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. In the same regard, it is the geographical proximity of Pound Gap to Devil John's Virginia home that is used in Fox's description of Lonesome Cove to Fox's fictionalized town of the Gap. In short, the actual trail of the Lonesome Pine laid not between Big Stone Gap and a fictional mountain homestead, as is generally believed, but between the modern town of Pound and what remains of Devil John Wright's land at Horse Gap just outside the town limit. While it is simple historical fact that Fox's character of Devil Judd Tolliver is based on Devil John, the physical description of Devil Judd may be more remarkable than one may think. Fox describes Devil Judd as being a giant. Interpretations of the Devil Judd character have usually been of a large, stocky, robust, and bearded mountain man. This would be the visage created by the quintessential Devil Judd Tolliver portrayed so well by Tommy Masters of Big Stone Gap in his years with the outdoor drama. In reality, Fox's description, exemplified by illustrations in the original novel, is of a proportionately built man with gauntly, thin facial features comparable to a bird of prey. It is an accurate description of Devil John Wright, except for references to his giant stature. John Fox Jr. knew Devil John from his mid-50s up to his mid-70s. John was indeed a tall, somewhat lanky figure, but he was no giant. What may be so remarkable about this is, Rather than being just a literary device used to convey Jack Hale's courage in dealing with the giant Devil Judd, is that Devil John Wright was related to and close with a real-life giant. Devil John's favorite uncle was the proportionately built 400 to 500 pound, 7-foot, 11-inch tall circus performer, the Kentucky Giant, Martin Van Buren Bates. This close relation and all of the exceptional tales that it undoubtedly possessed, being such an important part of Devil John's life, was probably not lost on an accomplished writer such as John Fox Jr. Unfortunately, it is a proposition which can't be conclusively proven. However, it seems to be more than coincidence that a main character developed by an author as adept as Fox at blending plural sources into the singular, described as a giant, would just happen to be based on a man actually related to a genuine giant. Therefore, the contention that the character of Devil Judd Tolliver's stature was inspired by Devil John's real-life giant uncle just might be viewed as more obvious inference than sheer conjecture. In the novel, Jack Hale's nemesis and rival for June's affections is her cousin, young Dave Tolliver. Young Dave is presented as the son of another of Devil Judd's brothers, referred to as Old Dave Tolliver. The reader is led to understand a backstory of a falling out occurring between Devil Judd and his older brother, Old Dave, prior to the story's beginning. Inasmuch as unraveling John Fox Jr.'s inspiration and sources regarding Devil John Wright, his kin, and the region's history is concerned, here is where things get a little murky. Devil John Wright did have 4 brothers. However, when Fox knew Devil John, none of these were older than Devil John, and none were named Dave. Likewise, none of Devil John's brothers had a son named Dave, and the only one who named his son after him was Samuel Wright. It has already been ascertained that Samuel Wright, kinky-haired Sam, is the basis for the character of Uncle Billy, and there was no falling out between Devil John and his brother in the novel or in real life. A comparison of kinky-haired Sam's son reveals no corresponding attributes to the young Dave character. Further complicating any attempt at identifying Hale's rival, young Dave, with any actual counterpart in the Wright family is the fact that the young Dave character's father, Old Dave, can actually be identified with a well-known historical figure. This would be the real-life person and infamous murder victim, Old Ira Mullins. In Fox's novel, Old Dave is murdered by the only character in the story called by his real-life name. This would be the wonderfully creepy but accurately portrayed backwoods sorcerer and outlaw known as the Red Fox. History records that Swedenborgian holy man, renowned herb doctor and cold-blooded killer Doc M.B. Taylor, simply known as the Red Fox, was convicted and hanged for the murders of old Ira Mullins and members of his family in 1893. The Red Fox, along with 2 accomplices, laid in wait as old Ira and his kin traveled by a place that would later become known as the Killing Rock, at the crest of Black Mountain. It was here, near the Virginia-Kentucky border, that old Ira was ambushed as he sat in a jolt wagon, which, being unable to walk, he was forced to travel in. The poor man didn't have a chance. The only 2 survivors, including old Ira's son, easily identified the Red Fox as the leader of the assassins. While it seems that old Ira's son should be able to be linked to the young Dave Tolliver character, this is problematic. The boy did not share Ira's first name. His name was John Mullins, and he was only 14 years old at the time. This seems much too young to match up with the young Dave character's portrayal in Fox's novel. To date, no relative of or any person contemporary with Devil John Wright can be matched with the character of young Dave Tolliver. It seems that this major character is either based on some actual person known only to John Fox Jr., thus lost to history, or is wholly a fictional construct of the author's imagination. The latter contention is bolstered by the fact that, by the novel's end, the young Dave character is conveniently killed off while out west, a demise which presently can't be attributed to any known person. As to the minor character, June's little brother Bub, there does seem to be a corresponding real-life person the character could have been derived from. Bub is described as a young boy who is either a brother or step-brother to the heroine, June Tolliver. The short-syllabled nickname Bub is a common one throughout Appalachia and the South in general. While no actual ages for any of the main characters in the novel are given, a range for some, especially June, can be estimated from the story's narrative. It seems that at the beginning of the approximate decade that unfolds in the book, June Tolliver is first introduced as an adolescent of about 14 to 16 years old. This leaves an impression of little Bub Tolliver as being somewhere between 8 and 11 years old. This makes for a criteria of a real-life son of Devil John Wright of about 10 years of age that John Fox Jr. would have encountered when visiting his friend's home. Such a young boy would be expected to have a short-syllabled nickname with which everyone in the Wright household referred to him. Is there any corresponding real-life person? The answer is yes. Devil John Wright did have one son of particular notoriety and is the most likely source for the character of Bub Tolliver. This person was born in 1898, making him exactly 10 years old when The Trail of the Lonesome Pine was published. John Fox Jr. would have actually watched this young man grow up. Due to another, younger sibling's inability to accurately pronounce his first name, this man was known all his life by an unusual short-syllabled nickname. This was the illustrious William T. Wright, whose little sister mispronounced his first name as Chidham instead of William. Thus he was and continues to be simply known as Chid. Chid Wright would grow to become a highly educated, prominent civic leader, teacher, administrator, and renowned author of the memoir of his father, whom he loyally cared for until his death. William Chid Wright published Devil John Wright of the Cumberlands in 1970. If John Fox Jr. relied on any real-life source for the character of Bub Tolliver, Chid Wright seems to be the obvious choice. June Tolliver's stepmother is a minor character in the story. Her real name is never given. She is simply referred to as a stepmother. Why Fox failed to flesh out this character is not known, but her description makes it obvious that she is based on an actual person. She is portrayed as being reticent in conversation, but given to verbal and physical abusiveness when angered. She lives with Devil Judd, but is not June's real mother. With the exception of performing rudimentary chores, she is presented as being bedridden. The inference should be obvious by the portrayal. The stepmother character is undoubtedly based on Devil John's first legal wife, Mattie Humphrey Wright. Consider the following. The stepmother would be based on a real-life spouse of Devil John Wright. She would have been present in the household on Elkhorn Creek during the time frame spanning the years of Devil John's friendship with Fox. This would include her living presence at the 1908 publication date of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. Children, such as that portrayed by June, who were fathered by her husband with other women, were within her charge. With the exception of being capable of performing menial physical tasks, she stays in her bed. She is given to violent outbursts. This person is portrayed as having little quality of life and very limited social interaction. If, as has been proposed, Devil John's wife, Mattie, indeed suffered from some sort of mental illness or dementia, Fox's description of the stepmother based on Mattie would be an accurate one. It is this description, taken to be based on the poor woman's real-life circumstances, that further bolsters the contention that Mattie Wright was actually a mentally disabled individual. It is an unfortunate fact, rather than being more precisely portrayed as simply incapable, the stepmother character comes off as the stereotypical, lazy, hillbilly matriarch. It is an unintended consequence of such characterization on Fox's part that would later be reflected by the unflattering, cliché portrayals of mountain mothers in such works as Lil Abner and Hollywood's Ma Kettle. Mattie Wright passed away 17 years after being thus immortalized. The cause of her death was listed simply as senility. The Phelan clan, also called the Red Phelans, is the archenemy of the Tolliver clan, also referred to as the Black Tollivers. One of the book's major themes incorporates the ongoing family feud between the Tollivers, headed by Devil Judd, and the Phelans, headed by Old Buck Phelan, and it is well known and accepted that this feud is based on the actual Wright-Jones feud of the mid-1880s. The corresponding history of the Wright-Jones feud with the Trail of the Lonesome Pines portrayal of the Tolliver-Phelan feud is an easy one. If Devil Judd is accepted as being based on Devil John, then there is only one candidate for the feud portrayed in the novel. This is the Wright-Jones feud that would have been related to, if not witnessed firsthand by, Fox during his friendship with Devil John. Based on this, the character of Old Buck Phelan in the book is easily associated with Devil John's real-life nemesis, Old Clabe Jones. Likewise, the Phelans are undoubtedly based upon the Jones clan of Knott County, Kentucky. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Fox's murderous character, Bad Rufe Tolliver, is based on none other but Bad Talt Hall. The corresponding historical facts of Bad Talt's life with the portrayal of Bad Rufe are unassailable. Indeed, it is the unfortunate demise of Bad Talt Hall and the Red Fox that reveals the time frame for the story of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. It is the known execution date of Bad Talt Hall from which can be extrapolated, using the novel's narrative, the span of years within which the Trail of the Lonesome Pine actually takes place. Bad Talt, though not a relative, was a constant figure in the Wright household. As such, he was well known, even feared by Devil John's children. Accordingly, Fox portrays Bad Rufe as not being a blood relative to the main character, June Tolliver. In the book, she refers to him as a foster uncle, whom she feared. At the beginning of the novel, Bad Rufe has been sent out west by Devil Judd in order to quell the ongoing hostilities between the Tollivers and the Phelans. Likewise, at the behest of Devil John Wright, Bad Talt Hall traveled westward to Memphis, Tennessee, to relieve tensions during the Wright-Jones feud. It was upon Hall's return to the region that he committed the crime for which he was hanged. Bad Talt Hall murdered Police Chief James Hilton in the town of Norton, Virginia. This is the event portrayed in The Trail of the Lonesome Pine of Bad Rufe gunning down Guard Sergeant Mockabee at the town of the Gap. Thus, the town of Norton is included as a source for Fox's fictional town in the novel. In the book, Bad Ruth's trial occurs in The Gap. Here, the outlaw is convicted on the dramatic testimony by the heroine, June Tolliver. He is sentenced to hang by the jury. It is a novel addition to the outdoor drama performed every summer in Big Stone Gap that audience members are placed on stage as jury members in the drama's rendition of Bad Ruth's trial. As he stands on the gallows, also portrayed as being constructed at the Gap, one of Devil Judd's clansmen attempts to shoot Bad Ruth from a hidden sniper's nest. This was in order to keep Devil Judd's promise that no Tolliver would ever be hanged. Unfortunately for Bad Ruth, the sniper's bullet merely wings him. Thus, gravely wounded, he meets his end kicking at the hangman's noose. The reality is that Bad Talt was jailed, tried, and executed, not in Big Stone Gap, but in the newly formed county seat of Wise, Virginia. Wise had been called Gladeville during the Civil War. It is Bad Talt's incarceration, trial, and execution that allows the town of Wise to be included in Fox's depiction of the Gap. As of a matter of fact, Bad Talt Hall was the first person to ever be executed in Wise County, Virginia. He was hanged on September 2nd, 1892. Just as the novel is concerned with Devil Judd Tolliver allowing any of his kin to be hanged, the community had very real concern as to whether or not Devil John Wright would allow his best friend to be executed. Newspapers as far east as Lynchburg, Virginia, echoed those concerns by reporting that the infamous outlaw Devil John Wright and his gang would attempt to break Hall out of the jail by violence. As a result, more than 50 extra guards were placed at the jail and adjoining gallows on the day of the hanging. Instead of a last-minute violent reprieve, neither Devil John, who was not present at the execution, nor any of his kin attempted any jailbreak. Devil John sent inquiry to his old comrade asking if Bad Talt wished to be buried in Kentucky. This dashed any last hope Hall may have had regarding any rescue. Bad Talt Hall met a grisly end, having his life slowly strangled away for a reported 17 minutes by the noose. Devil John sent a wagon for his friend's body and buried Thomas Talton Bad Talt Hall in his own family cemetery, where he would also bury two of his sons and his wife and lifelong companion, Maddie. Named for her birth month, June Tolliver, Fox's most famous character, is the heroine and main character of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. As such, John Fox Jr. portrays her in two distinct ways. First, she is depicted as the teenage daughter of Devil Judd Tolliver. She is described as being like a little wild animal when originally encountered by the civilized engineer Jack Hale at the base of the Lonesome Pine. Hale, the cosmopolitan foreigner, is immediately smitten by the wily, barefooted nymph in her little red dress. He will eventually sponsor her relocation to the Gap, where she receives education, social training, and clothing available in turn-of-the-century Appalachia. As the story progresses, June is sent to Lexington, Kentucky for higher education. Here she resides with Hale's sister. Eventually, she is sent to New York City, where the metamorphosis from backwoods scamp to sophisticated young lady is completed. It is this refined, beautiful, and educated sophisticate that is Fox's secondary portrayal of June Tolliver. The resemblance of this second incarnation of June Tolliver to John Fox Jr.'s real-life love interest, the Austrian operatic diva and New Yorker Fritzi Scheff, cannot be denied. Of course, this becomes the ultimate irony of the novel. As June is transformed into a full-fledged, sophisticated lady about town, Hale descends more and more into uncivilized Appalachian-styled austerity back home in the Gap. By the story's end, the novel's two main characters, still embroiled in their romance, have virtually reversed their respective roles. Under such ironical circumstance, can their love be reconciled? You'll have to read the book to find out. It is the first portrayal of June that can be explored for a corresponding real-life figure as part of the character's basis in regard to Devil John Wright. The primary criteria can be based on one simple contention. June is the biological daughter of Devil Judd Tolliver. Devil Judd is based on Devil John. Therefore, June Tolliver must be based in part on a real-life daughter of Devil John Wright that John Fox Jr. would have encountered and was apparently indelibly impressed with during his many visits to Devil John's home. Adding to a criteria of a corresponding real-life daughter of Devil John's and narrowing the choices would be June's depicted age. As previously stated, the heroine June gives damning testimony at Bad Ruth's trial, resulting in his conviction and subsequent hanging. It is known that the actual event corresponding to this is the trial and execution of Bad Todd Hall. These events actually took place in 1892. The novel's narrative spans a time frame of approximately 8 years from June's introduction to the trial. She is originally portrayed as an adolescent of 14 to 16 years old. This results in a 22 to 24-year-old June Tolliver testifying at her foster uncle's trial. By simply doing the math working backwards, an approximate birth year for whichever of Devil John's daughters June is based upon can be calculated. This would be a span between the late 1860s up to 1870 for a possible birth year of any real-life daughter of Devil John's to be a basis for the June Tolliver character. Preferably, this would include a daughter born in the month of June or possessing a first name that might precipitate Fox choosing to change the actual name to June. In regard to the daughters of Devil John, there seems to actually be two candidates meeting the birth year and other historical criteria for June Tolliver. Now, there have long been those who, for whatever reasons, have maintained that Fox's heroine is a completely fictional construct. It's hard to see how this can be the case. John Fox Jr. seems to employ the local color genre style of blending plural real-life sources in virtually all of his characterizations. This was done with few exceptions. For example, in regard to June, the character is portrayed as having blonde hair. While it is true that none of Devil John's daughters had blonde hair, Fox's wife, Fritzi Sheff, was famously blonde-headed. It must be remembered, the Trail of the Lonesome Pine was actually dedicated to Fritzi Sheff. The contention that John Fox Jr.'s most famous character, June Tolliver, is completely made up seems to be unfounded. Beyond all of this, there is an additional somewhat disconcerting factor that must be included in the criteria of a real-life daughter of Devil John's being an inspiration for June Tolliver. Consider the following excerpt taken from the February 5, 1931 memorial article regarding Devil John Wright, appearing in the Mountain Eagle newspaper in Letcher County, Kentucky. During the day on Sunday, as many as 2,000 people visited the old home of John Wright, attended the funeral services, and viewed the remains. People who knew him came from hundreds of miles distant. His daughter, June, one of John Fox's characters, came in from Pennsylvania. The reason for this seemingly conclusive report being somewhat disconcerting regarding a real-life source for Fox's character is fourfold. First, none of Devil John's daughters were named June. Second, all of the children of Devil John in attendance at his funeral were photographed posing by his casket. The newspaper article goes on to report this photographing of his children. The problem is that all of those in the picture are easily identified. None of the women meet any reasonable criteria for June, and none of them were from Pennsylvania. Thirdly, there is absolutely no report or tradition within the Wright family of any of Devil John's daughters being the basis for June Tolliver. Much less would be the lack of report or tradition of the presence of such a person at his funeral within the family. The family simply made no such claim. Lastly, this excerpt is taken from the same article where some facts regarding Devil John Wright are made which may be erroneous. This would include the contention of Devil John's presence at the Battle of Shiloh during the Civil War. The article's contention, however, simply can't be ignored and is cautiously added here. The first daughter of Devil John Wright that may be a contender as the inspiration for June Tolliver is a woman named Easter Wright. While Easter would not have been a teenager when first encountered by John Fox Jr., being born in 1884, she would have been June's depicted age at the 1908 publication of the book. Her name, Easter, with its spring-like connotation, can't be ignored as being so proximal to the spring-like name of June. The second and best contender for Fox's inspiration is the seldom referred to, virtually unknown daughter fathered by Devil John with Margaret Austin. This daughter is the somewhat mysterious Mahala Wright. This person is mysterious because there is a conspicuous lack of recorded facts regarding her. Her inclusion as a possible basis for the June Tolliver character is simple. She is the one and only daughter by Devil John that fits the criteria of being a teenager when Fox could have first encountered her. Mahala was born in 1866. This would have made the girl about 19 years old when Fox could have presumably met her in 1885. Obviously, this renders an age within a couple of years of that depicted in the June Tolliver character. This is especially true when the date of the trial and June's dramatized testimony is considered. Mahala, whose name is a Creek Indian word meaning beautiful, would have been the one and only daughter of Devil Johns in their mid-20s, just as June is portrayed during the 1892 trial. Additionally would be the name Mahala. It is doubtful that Fox would have considered such a uniquely Native American name to be a good fit for his heroine. It can only be surmised that Fox wouldn't confuse his readers, who still held strong negative biases against Native Americans, by depicting his main character with her real Native American Christian name of Mahala. Regardless, the mystery surrounding Mahala Wright endures as it does for the indomitable June Tolliver. The final aspect of the Trail of the Lonesome Pine to be explored is the novel's namesake, the Lonesome Pine itself. Some maintain that the Lonesome Pine was merely a romantic plot device. There never was any such tree. Some have scanned the many ridges encircling Big Stone Gap, Virginia, in hopes of spying the telltale crown of the tree towering above all others. Others claim it resided at the summit of Pine Mountain in Letcher County, Kentucky. Still others have asserted that it existed farther west in Kentucky's Bluegrass region. It has even been reported as being somewhere in Tennessee's Smoky Mountains. Was there ever a real Lonesome Pine? Can we know where it originally was? Can we ascertain its current whereabouts? Incredible as it may seem, the answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. The famous tree is described in Fox's novel as standing like a conspicuously tall, lone sentinel at the summit of a mountain. At the base of this mountain is located the Tolliver homestead in Lonesome Cove on Lonesome Creek, both ostensibly named for the lonesome pine. The opposite side of this mountain faces a large gap in the opposing ridge of mountains. Within this gap lay the small mountain community known as the Gap, from which the giant evergreen could be seen by all. It is his curiosity regarding such an improbable landmark, most trees atop windy mountains can't grow very tall, that evokes newcomer to the Gap, engineer Jack Hale, to climb the trail leading from the Gap to the auspicious tree. Simultaneously, a young mountain girl named June Tolliver has sneaked from Lonesome Cove to climb to the tree. Here she views the Gap and considers the big, unknown world laying beyond the little town, represented by the endless rolling ridges stretched to the horizon. It is the unlikely meeting of Jack and June at the Lonesome Pine that sparks the timeless romantic story unveiled in the novel. When John Fox Jr. and Devil John began their friendship, Devil John maintained no less than two homes. The primary of these would be the home on Elkhorn Creek in Letcher County, Kentucky. As stated, here Devil John's only neighbors were his brother Samuel and his wife Martha, who ran a grist mill off of the creek. This is undoubtedly the basis for the Tolliver homestead presented in the novel as Lonesome Cove on Lonesome Creek. However, this can't be considered as the location for the Lonesome Pine. There is no mountain just above the home where one could climb to view an opposing mountain gap. There is no adjacent town to be viewed, even if such a peak existed. The second notable home maintained by Devil John, and where Fox would spend the majority of time visiting, was located just outside the modern-day town of Pound in Wise, Virginia. Here, Devil John's home was situated by a creek at the base of the mountain forming the eastern flank of Horse Gap. At the top of the peak above Devil John's home, one is presented with a view of an opposing mountain gap, the town laying within that gap, and endless rolling ridges stretching to the horizon. The mountain above Devil John's old home place at Horse Gap, just outside the town previously known as the Pound Gap, is littered like no other adjoining peak with pine trees. While Devil John was aware of the celebrity accorded to him by the Trail of the Lonesome Pine, he reportedly never read the book that was his greatest claim to fame. During the novel's initial popularity, Devil John simply remained involved in land dealing, law enforcement, and, unfortunately, logging on his property. He simply did not realize that standing atop the land he owned at Horse Gap stood one of the most famous pieces of lumber in American history, the Lonesome Pine. An article released by the Associated Press upon the death of Devil John in 1931 contains an excerpt from an interview conducted with him at the home at Horse Gap just outside Pound, Virginia. It reads as follows. Though Devil Judd Tolliver was inspired by his own character, Wright never read The Trail of the Lonesome Pine or any of Fox's books. Often he would guide callers to where the Lonesome Pine had stood. Son, he once told a reporter, the Lonesome Pine was cut down and sawed into lumber. Some of it was used for beams in that old water mill you might have seen down there at the side of Pound Village. While John Fox Jr. relied upon Devil John's Kentucky home on Elkhorn Creek for the inspiration regarding details of the fictional Lonesome Cove, it is the pine tree-studded peak on the outskirts of Pound, Virginia, that was the actual location of the very real Lonesome Pine. Likewise, it is doubtful that few, if any, of the townspeople residing in Pound, Virginia, realized that their town, formerly called the Pound Gap, is a major inspiration for Fox's The Gap in the novel. Regardless, it is Pound, Virginia, where the legendary Lonesome Pine once stood and inspired one of the most enduring works of literature in American history. Fittingly, it is on the peak forming the western flank of Horse Gap, directly opposite from where the mighty tree once stood, that a small cemetery can be found. Here is the final resting place of Devil John Wesley Wright, now eternally on the real trail of the real Lonesome Pine.